Chapter 16, Windcatcher. Chapter 16. Though Tony was a good swimmer, most of his swimming had been done in pools or at protected beaches. The channel was very different. No sooner did he hit the water, kicking his legs, swinging his arms for all he was worth, than he felt himself being swept hard to one side by a powerful current. It was not the direction he wanted to go. His first reaction was to fight back. When that didn't help, when the powerful drift continued, he tried to stop himself by lowering his feet. Too late. It was too deep. Shaking his head clear, struggling to keep cool, Tony attempted to tread water. For a moment, he held place. With that came calmness, but the calmness began to fade when his energy lagged and he began to be pushed farther from Money Island. Abruptly, Tony decided he must get back to Hoghead Island. It took only a few strokes in that direction to see how ineffective he was. The press of the water was too much. He could not go back. Now Tony twisted around. Once again, he began to take wild strokes in the direction he thought of Money Island. He managed to make some headway. Moving in the right direction even eased his feeling of helplessness. He settled down and began to swim with steadier strokes. 5 minutes later, he was forced to rest. Treading water, he made another attempt to see where he was. The shore he had been aiming for no longer looked like Money Island. Had he turned himself around back toward Hoghead? Was he going somewhere else? His struggle and the fog had confused him. Trying to resist a renewed onset of panic, Tony let his feet down, hoping that there was a bottom he could touch. There was not. There was nothing else to do but gulp down more air and move his arms steadily to keep him afloat. Tony now realized it didn't matter where he was. Reaching land, any land, was what he had to do. He began to swim again. This time he knew all too well he was swimming for his life. He made more progress than before, and as he continued to press on, he sensed he was no longer in the swiftly moving channel. Wherever he was, the tidal flow was greatly reduced. The fog grew thinner, too. He could even make out a shore. A surge of self-assurance gave him new strength. It was no longer an impossible distance. Bit by bit, the shore he was heading for loomed larger. He knew he was going to make it. The more he knew it, the stronger he felt. Suddenly, one of his sneakers dropped off. Once more, he lowered his feet in hopes of touching bottom. It was still impossible. Should he leave the sneaker or not? Looking at the land, he could make out rocks, lots of them. He was going to need that sneaker to walk. His renewed sense of confidence decided for him. He would dive for it. Taking a swallow of air, hoping the bottom wasn't too deep, Tony flipped over, then dove below the water's surface. He kept his eyes open. The water was about 7 feet deep and murky. Fingers of seaweed waved gently. Plumes of sand stirred by crabs spurted up. The shadow of a fish flitted by. Along the bottom, Tony could just make out alternate patches of rock and sand. White shells were scattered here and there, but no sneaker was in sight. Tony bobbed back to the surface. Treading water, he told himself he was wasting his time and energy looking for the sneaker. He must get to shore. But the rocks? No, he needed that sneaker. He made up his mind to take no more than a couple of dives. Trying to shift to a slightly different area, he plunged. At first, he saw nothing. But just as Tony came up, he thought he saw, out of the corner of his eye, a white patch. Was it the sneaker? He wasn't certain. He thought it was. He shot up to the surface, took in some air. Then, even while promising himself this would absolutely be his last try, he made another dive. What he found below was a different kind of bottom than before, not nearly as flat. He was seeing small mounds, lots of them, covered with seaweed. There was also what looked like the crude outline of the bones of a gigantic fish. And right in the midst of this, white against dark, Tony saw his sneaker. Grabbing his sneaker, Tony kicked back to the surface. Once there, he panted for breath and clamped the sneaker between his teeth, then began to swim forcefully toward the shore. It took a steady, rhythmic churn, but finally he was able to lower his toes to a firm bottom. In moments, he was standing up. From there he walked, arms and legs trembling from exertion, the rest of the way to the shore. Once on land, he put on his sneakers. Uncomfortable and waterlogged as they were, he was grateful he had them. The stones were sharp underfoot. Wearily, he began to clamber over rocks until he found a small patch of sand. Paying no mind to the fog and drizzle, he flung himself down. Exhaustion flooded over him now. As though diving, he spread his arms wide, wondering vaguely where he was, but glad beyond all else to be alive. He fell into a deep sleep.